So, what is the teachings of integral theory that are relevant to moving from conflict and division to a kind of civic, respectful exchange of views and a constructive engagement?
Well, I'm going to use a term that comes outside of integral theory, but I think it applies to it. And it's by philosopher Anthony Appiah.
Oh, yeah, I know
And
Anthony.
it's an idea that was also taken up by Danielle Allen, who's my favorite political philosopher,
I know her too.
Oh my God. Steve McIntosh is my favorite non-academic political philosopher, but she's my favorite political philosopher in the academy. And the concept is rooted cosmopolitanism. So, take a look at you, for example, Glenn. You are rooted in a Black American tradition, identity. You identify with it, you embody it, but that doesn't limit you to just that. You're also a man of the world, and you're not just confined to the discipline of economics. I've heard you talk about Thomas Mann and this one and that one. You are, as they say, a cultured brother, So rooted is saying that you can have, this is my interpretation, that you could have certain identities all the way from, indigenous to traditional to modern to postmodern. You can have all of those identities. You could have ethnic, gender, cultural, all of that, nationality. These are different forms of identity. All that's good. And these are rooted. You can say you're rooted in those. But the cosmopolitan is, as you know, being a citizen of the world. That's being world-centric. So integral theory provides, for me at least, a way to be rooted in certain identities, but not confined just to those identities, to have a larger sphere of care and concern so that it's about being both local and concerned with what's happening in my community, as well as what's going on in the world itself overall. I think so. That's a general way of putting it that I think is people can understand, and I just love that concept, rooted cosmopolitanism. So I think that's one way of putting it.
What do you say to, I can imagine a critic saying, well, that's easy for people to say if they sit pretty much in positions of power and so on. But okay, Black people need to be both Black and cosmopolitan. What do white people need to do?
Well,
do you see what I'm getting at? Some people can take their position for granted as part of the dominant culture.
Right.
Others have to find a way of making their peace without abandoning their origins or their identity. They have to find a way of making peace with the world. They have to grow.
Right. Well, that's interesting. White folks, whiteness. That's a big topic. I think, generally speaking, it applies across groups, categories, and identities, that perspective. So it's not obviously just for Black folks. Integral theory, I'm like a unicorn up in there, man. It's not a lot of me, not a lot of us's up in there at this point. But I think one of the tragedies, frankly, of whiteness in the United States is kind of a Faustian bargain. Like if you look at the histories of Irish, Italian, Polish, and others, Jewish? It was almost as if they said, first of all, we know the original white folks, and that within and among Black folks, we joke about this. And we know that our ancestors, that our parents, grandparents, is like, the real white folks are white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Everybody else, the white ethnics, ain't really white, but but the Faustian bargain, it seems to me, was almost as if they said, look, if you're willing to become white and kind of bleach out your ethnicity, you can come in the club and get the benefits and privileges, but just leave that up, leave that primitive ethnocentric stuff. Now, of course, there are people who still hold on to their ethnic identity, obviously. But I think more white folks need to become rooted cosmopolitans. I think more white folks need to be aware of their various identities, right? Not just racial, because the way whiteness is function, this, the way whiteness is function is that they didn't have to really think about being white because that was the default.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that was the default. So, Resmaa Menakem, who wrote a wonderful book called My Grandmother's Hands, he called it, I love it when people, I'm going to use a term that comes from the academy. I'm not in the academy, but I did 4 years of graduate work at NYU in American Studies, which is why I know the whole postmodern thing deeply from the literature itself. I like it when people interrogate or complicate certain terms. So he says white body, so he doesn't say white supremacy, he says white body supremacy. The way that white folks looked were the model, okay? Albert Murray would say the folklore of white supremacy. So he termed it in terms of what it is and where it came from. But Resmaa Menakem, but anyway, let me get back to the main point. So as the default, they didn't have to think about whiteness per se as an identity, but I think it's important, not per se because honestly, I'm like Stanley. I think race is a bullshit category. I think that the process of racialization, which is how race becomes racism, you have a racial worldview, like a way of seeing the world through race, and then you have racialization, where you have, you select certain characteristics and then you sort into different populations, and you give attributions of certain qualities based on that sorting. Then you essentialize as if those differences are biological and immutable. And then there's action and behavior that is based on that process of racialization. I think all of that is some bullshit, okay? But there are aspects of identity that are fine. Ethnicity, nationality, gender. And I know that all of these are complicated issues. The way postmodernism handles all these issues, it calls everything into question but race. It reifies and reinforces race for some strange reason. But my point is that I think more Americans overall, Albert Murray said, listen, our inheritance as Americans is the cultural and intellectual riches of mankind across time. There's no limitation. Andre Malraux had a concept called museum without walls, man. We have access to everything.
I heard that.
So we need to get with it. And when you look at it, man, it's not just about the United States. We could talk about disparities, and they're there, no question. But one of the things I wonder is, why is the United States on the OECD list of countries, 38 countries, why is the United States 28th in terms of STEM education? Why is there a U.S. News and World Report study that says that the United States is 26th in quality of life? What's up with that? So it's not just about Black folks trying to get up to the level of white folks. No, we're in a global economy, and we need to think globally, world-centric. And as you said on the show, what do you say? China's coming.
Yeah.
That's real, so we need to, all of us need to be rooted. That's good. But expand our care and concern that it goes from individual to family to community, however you conceive a community, to the world. I think that progression is something we all need to tap into.